Hello, welcome to week 4 and what will probably be our home away from home this week, the modules page. And you'll see why in a minute. But let's shoot on down to web links where you got an introduction of this part of the modules page last week with the Coyote versus Acme illustration of that reading, that satirical legal document. Parody. Important word here, parody of a legal document. Let's look at the parody of an online newspaper, rather probably the most famous one, The Onion. And it's right here on the web links list in the modules page. And there it is. And these are all parodies of actual news stories. So remember, not all satire is parody, but all parody is satire. So you'll see a few things here. Pick one to read, but remember, you're reading a parody, not the real news. Although for it to be funny, for you to enjoy it, you're going to have to know what the real news is. So keep that in mind. My advice is to look for a news article that you're familiar with in terms of what the real news is and how this is really turning the real news on its head. So pick on that basis. So there are quite a few. Again, if you know the real news, it's easier to spot the parody, the actual accurate news. Okay, that's one place you definitely want to go for this week. Also, you're going to have some reading to do. And let's hop over to the other part of the modules page, the class text list. And I think there it is. Arguments by analogy. Right there in Weston. So let me help you find it. And the easy way to do this is to use the table of contents right here on the left side of the screen. Once you do this, read online, unless you want to download it. Totally your call on that. I think this is quicker, but the PDF version is pretty fast too. So go to arguments by analogy, and then you can close this to give yourself a little more screen space. There you go. And here's an analogy made famous by the first female astronaut, a Russian named Valentina Tereshkova. And here's the analogy. As you can see, she's saying that women can be capable railroad workers. No one would argue that in Soviet Russia or anywhere else in Russia or the United States and many Western countries as well. Now, the relevant similarity, key word here, remember that, is that being a railroad worker is like being an astronaut because they both make extremely physical and technical demands. And then there's her conclusion. So she's got there are actually two premises, right? Physical and technical demands. Then her conclusion, therefore, women can be capable astronauts as well. And here's the key to understanding analogies. You want to read through this chapter, though, because it will give you a really solid understanding of analogies. But there's your key bit. Analogy is like saying one thing is like another, and that word like is the whole fulcrum, if you will, on which an analogy rests. And if the two things really do share at least one similarity. And then, of course, one can argue it's similar in other ways, which is where the argument often happens. So that's one place you'll want to go. Elsewhere on the module page, I'm going to tell you about an optional reading. It'll be required for next week, but it might come in handy. Totally your call for this week. And this is my piece on how satire and parody ridicule their subjects and imply a deduction. And I won't spend a lot of time on it today, but take a look at it. It does walk you through, if it ever opens, let's just open the PDF, make it easier while Canvas is making up its mind. And I kind of walk you through. I take an article from The Onion, the satirical newspaper parody you just saw. And this isn't in this month's Onion, but there's the Onion article. And of course, you'll only laugh if you know what the real news probably said. Pretty obvious, I think. And there's the implied deduction. Notice that since it's humor, satire, the common sense, the real world deduction is here. No, it's not. Because, no, the real world deduction would be we need to reduce climate change and hopefully roll it back, right? So it's opposite of the common sense deduction, which is what makes it funny. Of course, you have to know the common sense answer. For any humor to work, for any human, that you need to know what the actual real conclusion is. For the punchline, the illogical deduction, to get a laugh. That's why comedy and argument are so similar, and they both rely on common sense. So take a look at that. I'll spend a little bit more time with this next week. And that will help you. Like I said, this one's optional this week. Might be your friend. When you get onto the discussions page, you'll see why it's an option. It's just a suggestion to read it. When you get going on this week's assignments. And of course, you got the discussion, which is why that piece of reading I showed you is optional but handy. What isn't optional is, of course, this chapter, and also the argument terms, commuted to argument terms, where you've been at least 2 or 3 times before, I hope. And then the reading question. Now, the extended argument analysis is coming up. I hope you're thinking it through and working on it. There's also a paragraph assignment coming up. And it's based on The Onion. So you don't have to start it right away. I would, once you get the discussion done Thursday because of the holiday, right? And Friday, I'm going to move that to Saturday. Anyway, once you get those done, get going on this. And then you'll sort of do the type of thinking you need to do to get it going. And oh, by the way, old business, I know, but if you get down here to the paragraph assignments, paragraph number 1 on the dead grandmother exam syndrome will come in really handy for you if you take option 1 on this essay. And paragraph 2 on Coyote versus Acme, also for option 1, pretty handy. Now, if you jumped into the short argument, that's where you did your analysis of Marx. That would be for option 2. So the 2 paragraph assignments you just did will help you get a leg up on option 1 if you choose to do option 1. And as always, I am right here on the discussions page in the class chat room if you have questions about any of the assignments. And there's this week's discussion. Have a great week. Stay in touch.